Hello, welcome to the book club discussion. My name is Dana Morningstar, and the book we are going to be discussing this month, is Who's Pulling Your Strings by Harriet Braiker. So the book club is something that we do it's the last Thursday of every month is when it happens, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so feel free to bring any questions you have. Even if you haven't read the book, you're more than welcome to hop into the chat and ask any questions you might have or contribute anything that you might feel the need to contribute. So welcome. So Tanitria is here. Michelle is here. Datsuk is here. LP, free to be me. Good deal. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. So Healthy Love is here. Nicole. Got lots of people hopping on tonight. I never know because this is something that we only do once a month, if people actually remember that we're doing this or not. So I never know if anybody's going to be here. Sonia, Linda. Welcome. Healthy Love says, I listened to the book like 3 times. Yeah, it was a great book. And I enjoyed the narrator too. There was another audiobook, I don't even remember the title, that I got for book club like a year or so ago, and the narrator choice was awful. And I could not even listen to it. It was so bad. That was so disappointing because I love me some audiobooks. And speaking of books, the book for next month, before I forget, is called Emotional Blackmail, and it's by Susan Forward and Donna Frazier. I will say on Amazon, this book does not have an ebook version or an audiobook version, which makes me sad. So I had to order it from my library because I'm really trying hard to not buy paperback books, because it's a slippery slope into me becoming a book hoarder like I once was. So just a heads up, if you want to read that book, that might be something to take into consideration, that you need to order the paperback or get it at your local library. Let's see. Pause, Leslie, Michael, Shirley, Lilith. Healthy Love says, awesome. Ooh, okay, not awesome. Yeah. So that's just a heads up. And I think what I'm going to try to start doing too, because I just hadn't thought about books potentially like not being in either ebook form or audiobook. So this was the first time I've come across that. So now I think what I'm going to start doing is checking them like 3 months ahead to see, so I can give everybody a heads up, and so if people need to order it or what have you, that they can. Okay, so I guess let's just hop into it. So I have my notes on this book. If you're interested in my notes, you can find them on my website, thriveafterabuse.com, under the book club section. And every month I try to have my notes up by like the 10th, the 15th or so of the month for that book. And I generally, I think, end up doing about 11 big takeaways from every single book that we read. So that's a great idea. Healthy Love messaged me on Facebook the other day. She just got a book called the Self-Esteem Workbook, and I ordered that off of Amazon. I haven't gotten it yet, so hopefully it'll be here any day now. But she was wanting to see if we could do the Self-Esteem Workbook together through book club, and I'll have to see what the book looks like. My life is an open book, so I don't mind getting deep on here, but I don't know if other people, I haven't looked at the book because I don't have it yet. So I'm open to doing that, but I'll have to see it. So that way it's, I don't know how helpful it would be for me to kind of share, all my insights if I have to be the only one to talk about that book. But I'll get back to you on that as soon as I get the book. Okay, so let's hop into The 11 big takeaways from Who is Pulling Your Strings. So this book is all about manipulation, and it's a really great book. It's a thorough book. They talk about really kind of what manipulation is, kind of different ways that it goes down, and how you can break free from it. So I really enjoyed how thorough the book was about manipulation. And this was something that we had touched on, I think, well, probably every single live stream we touch on manipulation, but I felt like we really touched on this a lot yesterday. And because a lot of people, and understandably so, I was there too once, where they get really hung up on the label of, is this person a narcissist? Are they a sociopath? Can they change? What am I really dealing with? And they really get hung up in that spot. And I feel like like I said, while I totally understand that, because all of this is very new for people, and it's sort of like, what exactly am I dealing with? I think that the bigger thing to focus on is the behavior, and it's understanding, what's going on. And like, if you are being manipulated, then that's the thing to focus on, and that's the thing to break free from. And so that's a lot of what this book talks about. So, okay. So my big takeaway number one is that manipulation can happen anywhere, to anyone, by anyone. Manipulation respects no relationship boundaries, and it can happen to anywhere. And it can happen anywhere, between friends, family, work, with people of any gender, age, religion, profession, sexual orientation, and so on. Manipulation causes feelings of confusion, anxiety, depression, and powerlessness. It's unpleasant and demeaning. Manipulators do not care about your feelings. Their manipulation is about them getting what they want, often at the expense of those around them. If you benefit from a manipulative relationship, it's accidental. I think that was huge. And then I kind of put in there too, or if it is intentional, it's only because it's another layer of manipulation. Because some manipulators can do a great job at coming across as a loving, caring, thoughtful, soulmate type person. And they may do favors and dote on you and really kind of lavish that attention and affection on you. But keep in mind that them doing this is often because, in their mind, this is their way of justifying their bad behavior. And it's also them justifying to themselves that they really are a good person. When a person is benefiting from a manipulative relationship, when the manipulator is laying it on really thick, you're going on vacations, they're willing to go to therapy, they're, gifts and presents and future faking is what we call it, all of that stuff. That's also all part of the honeymoon cycle of abuse. And so this is when they're on their best behavior. And then that devalue stage tends to follow, where the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse, psychological abuse starts happening again. And every time a person goes through this cycle, it tends to become worse and worse. Okay. So point number 2 is you hold more power than you realize. You can stop the manipulation. And then I put in my notes here are that, however, this is not the same as us changing the manipulator. So 2 very different things there. The only way to stop manipulation is to see it for what it is and to stop falling for it. In other words, we have to change our behavior and really how we're perceiving the situation. And like I've talked at great length about, normal, decent people tend to have normal, decent intentions, and we tend to not realize that we're being manipulated because we're not trying to manipulate them. And so it can take a while for a person to understand, like, oh my goodness, this person that I thought they were my work friend or my significant other or a parent or a family member. Like, I didn't think that they would try to manipulate me. I thought we were all kind of in the same corner here. And it turns out that no, they've had this kind of hidden agenda all along. And it can just take a while for a normal, decent person to really understand that that's what's going on. So, if in order for us, to stop falling for it, we have to understand that we are in fact being manipulated, and being manipulated is not your fault. And because most people are unaware that that's what's going on. When we stop dancing this crazy making dance, when we stop feeding into being manipulated, when we wake up to it is really what it is. Understand that the manipulator will most likely either change tactics or they will find a new target. And they tend to do both, but they will also really escalate their behavior to a point of ridiculousness. And they will begin throwing out every single trick in the book in order to get that person to do what they want. Pity, charm, flattery, intensity, threats of violence, fear, guilt, obligation, threats of suicide, made up diseases. Oh, I've got cancer. Please answer your phone. I have no one to talk to. Oh, I'm feeling really down tonight. You're my only friend. I really need to talk to you. I'm feeling suicidal. I just don't know anymore. Um, you know, or the opposite of that, which is that level of fear and intensity. This is all your fault. Oh, I see how it's going to be. Now you're just not going to talk to me. Oh, that's real mature. I expected more from you. I thought you were a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist or whatever. I thought you were better than this. Oh, what? You never make mistakes, blah blah blah. And so preparing ourselves for them to escalate is a big step in breaking the chain of this. So, and I also put in here, I think one of the main reasons that targets feel stuck is that they oftentimes don't want to leave or they're afraid to leave. They're like, I can't afford to leave, or I've got children with this person, or I don't know anybody. We've moved far away from my friends and family, and I'm stuck here. Or I've been with this person for 27 years. I don't know how to start over. Or their self-esteem is so ground down that they don't feel like, they're just tired and they don't feel like they can make it on their own. So there's lots of different factors at play as to why someone is not comfortable with asserting themselves or with kind of rocking the boat. And so a lot of people that are in this kind of feeling like between a rock and a hard place, they're like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to have more chaos in my home. I know they're not going to take it well if I start asserting myself. I just want them to change. And if it's just very complicated. So like the more the target has made this abusive person their whole world, the harder it's going to be for that target to like risk that person leaving. And so there's definitely this kind of, Stockholm syndrome type dynamic going on where you've got this person who's being so horribly mistreated, who's clinging to their abuser because their abuser is kind of the only life raft that they have out of this awful situation, but kind of realizing it but not realizing it, that their abuser is the one that's put them in this situation. And abuse is a very confusing thing, and oftentimes people feel like it's that there's three people in their relationship. There's them, then there's the Dr. Jekyll, then there's the Mr. Hyde. And that kind of level of almost like a bizarre triangulation really leads to this feeling of not knowing who you're dealing with at any given time, but also creates this feeling of it's me and you against this abusive person. But the Dr. Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde is the same person. So it's just a very confusing spot for a person to be in. And then I had added in here, if you are in a relationship where you're continually trying to walk on eggshells, trying to avoid upsetting somebody in order to maintain a relationship with them, then you don't have much of a relationship to begin with. If your relationship's going to end over you bringing up any thoughts, feelings, concerns, any issues you have, if it's going to end over that, then there is no relationship. And it's a hard reality to face, but the sooner we face it, the sooner we can be set free and then actually start rebuilding a life. So let me see here what is going on in the chat. That's a good one. Missouri Cowboy, hello, says he visualized the manipulator dragging the target around the dance floor until they tire and move on to a target willing to dance. Yes, pretty much. I think that's very accurate. Yes. And then Healthy Love says, I loved how she said that we get power by not engaging in the dance. Yes. And this is a very big thing, because when a person's, like she'd mentioned, person starts feeling powerless, and it's sort of like it just doesn't dawn on them that they can leave. Or if it does dawn on them, they feel trapped. They're like, I can't, like, I know I need to leave. I know I want to leave. I can't, because of kids, because of finances, because of all these reasons. It's very complicated for me to leave. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of them. I'm afraid of what they're going to do. I'm afraid of what they're going to do to my children, our children. And so it's a very difficult place for a person to try to regain that power in their life. But that's where the magic happens, is realizing that you do have power over it, and that we can't change them, but there's things about our situation that we can change. We can develop a safety plan on how to start preparing to leave. We can try to start setting some boundaries, and that oftentimes does not go over well. And you really, and again, it's difficult if a person doesn't like confrontation. They don't like getting yelled at, or being hit, or things escalating. It's going to be very difficult for them to bring stuff up, because they're like, I know this is it's poking an angry bull. Like, it's not going to go over well. And I think in this book, if I remember correctly, she talks about doing some exercises, or maybe it was the last book we read. Either way, I really liked whichever author said that about role playing. So thinking things through, like the biggest tool that we have in our toolkit is the tool of anticipation. So the more that you can anticipate what they might say, how they might react, the more we can anticipate, what are we going to say? How are we going to respond? So we can stay in as much control as possible. Because I think a lot of people, myself included, when there's chaotic situations, when there's uncomfortable conversations, they tend to just freeze, and they don't know what to say or what to do, and they just shut down. And that's, if we can kind of move past that and get more of a plan in place, then we're going to be that much more prepared to have these conversations, or to kind of get that plan going. Burnt Sienna says, and sometimes defending myself feels like I'm stooping to their level. Okay, so let's talk about that really quick. With defending yourself, there's a difference between defending yourself and setting a boundary. And I think that she might go into this as well, if I remember correctly. But there is no point in trying to defend yourself, because you're not going to get through to that person. They're going to continue to drag you into these conversations from hell that are circular, that deflective, that go off topic, that blame you, that blame other people, that'll just end up enraging any normal person, because it's just a bunch of nonsense. So I would encourage you to just have your boundary, and set your boundary, and then hold your boundary, and don't get roped in and just dragged into these conversations from hell, because that's what they're going to do. Because you're dealing with a person who has very little to any, generally none, accountability for their behavior. It's always somebody else's fault. And that's crazy making when you're dealing with an adult who can't own their stuff. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Okay, point number 3. Oh, I liked this one. Point number 3, the difference between manipulation and influence. Manipulation is where one person seeks to control or prey upon another by artful, unfair, or insidious means. Manipulation enforces dependency, helplessness, and victimization. With manipulation, relationships stagnate and grow lopsided. Victims grow weaker and ever more compliant, even as resentment and hostility grows. Manipulation can be indirect and often includes hidden agendas, threats, intimidation, and coercion to ensnare and trap the target. The relationship is often established before the manipulation begins. As the manipulative behavior is tolerated, the manipulator will grow bolder. Some manipulators are aware of their behavior and of their agenda, and some are not. Regardless of whether or not they are aware of what they are doing and why, manipulative relationships are destructive for the target of such manipulation, and it's up to the target to develop and hold boundaries with a manipulative person. I think that's a very key point. And I know so many people get caught up in like, do they know what they're doing? And I love how she said, it doesn't matter. All that matters is where are your boundaries in this? How do you want to be treated? Like, where are your boundaries? Where are your standards? Where are your deal breakers? So whether or not they realize it or not is interesting, but it's not going to change the outcome of how you're going to handle the situation, because you're going to handle it the same regardless. If you start getting the feeling, well, I mean, if you're going to address the issue, the person's either going to change what they're doing or they're not. And if you get that vibe that this person seems to be enjoying this, like we talked about last night with that whole narcissistic smirk, that kind of duper's delight. If you get the vibe that somebody's really enjoying getting you riled up and dragging you into these conversations, and they just don't seem to care at all, they just have like that jaw-dropping level of lack of empathy and lack of remorse, just drive on. Like, you're not dealing with the person who's team oriented or who is concerned about reaching a solution. Like, they're only concerned about them winning, and it's going to be at the expense of you and your sanity and potentially your safety. So that's not workable. Okay, so some examples of manipulation can include withholding sex, pouting, sulking, silent treatment, making the target feel guilty, angry outbursts, inappropriate demands, and screaming fits. The target often feels sick when they want to do something they know the abuser won't like, and feels the manipulator has two very different personalities. The result is that the target slowly starts changing their life. The target may start to show a shift in their personality, spending less time with friends, walking on eggshells, confused and upset by their own behavior and by changes in the relationship. They may engage in ingratiating behavior, such as buying the abuser presents, being overly considerate, and being compliant, all in an attempt to get the manipulator to treat them with dignity and respect. The reality is that the more we give in to the demands of a manipulator, the less the target will be treated with dignity and respect. So I think that was a really valid point, that many of us, I think, will try to ingratiate ourselves. We try to become more of what they want, thinking, if I can just change, then that'll stop the abuse. That they'll eventually start, treating me with dignity and respect, giving me honesty and loyalty, and I can have the relationship that I thought I could have. Because again, it's that mindset of thinking that, oh, we're in a normal relationship, but we're just in a relationship with a really damaged person. And if we can just somehow continue to compromise and make things work, then we can have this normal relationship. And not realizing, no, we're not in a normal relationship, we're in an abusive relationship. So Butterfly Mama says, when do you go overboard on naming abuse? When the person says imperfection and hurt in relationships just happen and we need to forgive. Okay, that's a really great point. So here's my take on stuff. Everybody's going to have their own deal breakers on certain things. So sure, hurt feelings, frustration, getting upset, getting angry, fights in a relationship, all of that stuff's normal. When it becomes abnormal is how people handle it. So, it's one thing to get upset. It's another, it's not okay to be cruel, right? Somebody said yesterday that their therapist, which I loved this, had said, it's okay to be angry, but you don't need to be loud. And, yelling, cussing, screaming, belittling, slamming doors, silent treatment, all that kind of stuff, that it's abusive. And it's all about getting power and control. It's manipulative. That stuff's the problem. And so it'll be up to you how you handle it. So if you decide, if a person's giving you silent treatment, And I've said this to people before where I'm like, you know what? I don't do silent treatment. Like, if you're upset with me, it's okay to be upset, but just let me know when you're going to be ready to talk again. And then we can talk. And if they can't, if they're not going to give me a time frame, if they're not even going to answer that, then we're done. Like, I don't play game. I'm very quick to just start pruning people out of my life because I don't play games. But I will tell you, the people that I have in my life now, none of this is even an issue. You know, people might get hurt feelings over like like my phone. The last update, it dumped everything. It dumped everything out of my phone. My contacts, my calendar, everything. The update didn't install properly, and it was a mess. And so I missed. I had planned a dinner party, and I totally messed up. You know, and people were upset with me. And but the thing is though, like, we were able to talk about that. I owned it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Then I realized my whole calendar, everything was gone out of it. Birthdays, everything, and so I think normal people that are solutions oriented, they'll own their stuff, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's embarrassing, or they're willing to kind of meet you. They're willing to work towards a solution, and it's not like pulling teeth, So like, I don't fight. If somebody's lying to me, that's a deal breaker. If somebody's cheating on me, that's a deal breaker. If they're stealing from me, that's a deal breaker. If they're treating me with disdain or contempt or hostility, that's a deal breaker. And it doesn't, I don't even address that. Like, if somebody, that to me is outrageous. And when you see a person's mask slip and you're like, wow, I just realized, like, that person, I thought we were friends, but I don't even think that they like me. Like, they just showed me that they, in fact, probably hate me, and then they start acting hateful. Like, I don't need that in my life. So it's kind of depends on how, you know, where your deal breakers are in this, and how you want to bring stuff up with people. But I don't tolerate being yelled at. I don't do silent treatment. Definitely don't do name calling or put downs of any kind. So it's, like I said, one thing to be upset and to just be like, hey, you know what? I need some time. I need to go for a walk. Like, I'll call you tomorrow. Like, just, I need a break, that kind of a thing. But even that should happen very infrequently, So yeah, it's more about how people handle conflict than anything else. I'm a big fan of seeing how people react to stress. And I think that's a big important part of dating. How do they handle being sick? How do they handle losing? How do they handle not getting their way? And seeing that, and seeing if that's something that you want to sign up for. Yeah, postmodern saying, yeah, me neither, on the name calling or put downs of any kind. Nope. And this stuff can be just a real slippery slope. And a lot of it can have, it can have kernels of truth in it. And I think that's what really knocks a lot of people off balance, myself included, where you're like, well, okay, they're making comments about my body or my weight. Well, yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, I guess that, I can lose some weight. Like, I've been wanting to lose some weight, but it's like unwarranted criticism or subtle put downs, or there's so many things that I just don't do like anymore at all. I don't, I'm not a jealous person. If I'm in a situation where I'm feeling like I'm being triangulated, or someone's trying to plant seeds of jealousy, then I don't do that either. Like, it's just, I don't know. And it's crazy making. Postmodern was saying, yes, my last relationship was a mess. It was full of name calling and put downs. I could not believe the things he was saying to me. That's a great question. AJ says, Dana, can you elaborate on recognizing within yourself or oneself if you are overcoming codependency? So, sure. I think in large part, because the codependency can really rear its head in many, many different ways. And again, I'm less focused on the label, more focused on the behavior. So I don't, it's tough because it's difficult to see stuff within ourselves, you know? Um, so for me, I feel like at least the challenges that I'm having right now, and I'll probably have a totally different set of challenges in like the next 6 months, because that's kind of how life goes, I guess, um, is with setting boundaries and being honest with myself about what I can and can't do, and just trying to kind of like walk in my truth as much as I possibly can. So I think for me, overcoming that is just paying attention to how I feel and paying attention to my relationships with other people, and um, trying to really kind of get healthy boundaries, paying attention to when I feel like a boundary's been crossed or when I haven't set one. Um, you know, like those kinds of things. Everybody's going to have their own challenges, but people pleasing, saying yes when you mean yes, saying no when you mean no, not being a doormat, not tolerating disrespect or abuse of any kind is a big one. That's a big first step. And I think it starts with even being aware that you're being mistreated. So many of us aren't even aware that we're being mistreated. We just think that we're, like I said before, we're in this normal relationship with a really damaged person. And it takes a person a while, because generally it's because what we're experiencing doesn't line up with our idea of what abuse is. Sort of like, well, it's not, it's not that bad. I think maybe isn't only abuse like when somebody's hitting you. They're not really, they're not yelling at me, and they're not like, really tearing me to shreds. It's just kind of all these subtle, snarky put downs and constant criticism. And I just feel kind of nervous and maybe jealous and unhinged all the time. And I don't know why. It's difficult. The more you learn about abuse and subtle abuse, like emotional abuse, psychological abuse, even verbal abuse, the more things can start to make sense. Lilith says, yes, I never realized I was being abused. I think that's the vast majority of people, even people that are going through physical abuse, because most physical abuse isn't an aggressive attack. It might be a lot of screaming and yelling and put downs and blame. And then it might escalate to where that person is shoved or punched, or it doesn't tend to be like a full out, fist fight. It's just kind of one thing, and then that's it. And so if a person's got that going on in their relationship, and they might just tell themselves, well, that's just how we fight. And then they might also take ownership in that, because they're like, well, but then I hit him, I hit him back. Or maybe they even started it. And she talks about this too, about how frustration breeds hostility. And so if you're with the person who's doing silent treatment, doing subtle put downs, who won't tell you the truth, that's acting squirrely, that's provoking jealousy, that's doing all of these things, everybody's got their breaking point. And so it's very common for a person to finally become reactive and then lash out. And then they think, well, but maybe I'm the abuser. It's my fault. But it's like, no, you're living with a manipulative, crazy making person, and you finally had enough. Either way, it's a problem, and it's, you need to get out of that situation, because it's, not worth going to jail over. Okay. So the difference between manipulation and influence. So manipulation tends to have a very self-serving, the manipulator benefits from it, and it's generally at the expense of the other person. So they tend to use all forms of abuse, a lot of lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating, false promises, kind of nefarious means in order to kind of puppeteer this person to do what they want, knowing, or maybe even not even realize, they probably know, but not caring, I guess, that it's causing damage to the other person. Influence is where one person is trying to influence another for that other person's best interest. So teachers, doctors, therapists, good friends, and family will oftentimes try to influence those that they care about to take positive, empowering action in their lives. Influence, this is a big difference. Influence involves open and direct communication. The purpose of the action is made clear, and the person being influenced is allowed and encouraged to think for themselves and to make their own decisions. So, and then she goes on to give some examples of some manipulative situations that we'll cover here in a bit. But I think that that's very important. It's very important for people to think for themselves, to come up with their own solutions, to come up with their own, you guys know your situation the best. And so, especially, with channels like mine that are on this topic, we might talk a lot about going no contact, or, this is a problem, and, that you're being manipulated and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, you have to decide what is in the best interest for you. And if that means staying, if that means leaving, if that means going gray rock, if that means limiting contact, if that means going no contact, only you know what that looks like for you. So, okay. So here's some different examples that she gave. And I liked these examples because they are of a lot more subtle examples of manipulation, which, for us on this channel, we really discuss things that are like really problematic, like outrageously problematic, with the level of, Lifetime TV movie kind of drama level of manipulation and deceit and lie, just craziness. So I think it's good that she didn't talk about such extreme examples and talked about stuff that we might normally see in our daily life, but that might slide under our radar. So here's the first example. She gives it of Bob and Cindy. So Bob is a doctor with a thriving practice in California, and he meets Cindy, who's a strong, independent woman who lives in New York, and they meet at a conference. Their chemistry was off the chart. Things became a whirlwind. They were talking on the phone every day. They were seeing each other every other weekend. And they decided, because Bob had his business practice in California, that they would move in together, and that Cindy would fly from New York and move in with Bob. And everything was okay for a little while. But then he noticed that this strong, independent woman that he fell in love with had become very controlling, whiny, needy, and very different than who she thought he was, or who he thought she was. And so he was finding, she didn't want to go out with his friends. She didn't want him to go out with his friends. He felt kind of compelled and guilty, like, okay, well, I guess I'll stay home with her because she doesn't know anybody here. And she wasn't really doing anything except kind of hanging out in the house. And so finally, Bob ended up getting into therapy, and he's like, I don't know what to do with this situation. This is not the woman that I fell in love with. And the therapist had pointed out, she's manipulating you. And so it's going to be up to Bob to really set some limits about, hey, I'm going to go out with my friends. You're welcome to come along, but if you don't, then you don't. Or, hey, I'm going to, do X, Y, Z, and, either you're in or you're out, but I'm not going to, completely cut off my whole life and just hang out at the house with you because that's all that you want to do. So, and Bob kept thinking that, well, as soon as Cindy gets more settled, maybe she'd become more independent like she used to be, but this was not the case. And then also what was so confusing is that there were times that Cindy seemed to be very independent, and that she understood how her behavior was problematic, and that she'd promised to change, but she never did for long. So Bob came to realize in therapy that he was really hooked on this intermittent reinforcement and this false hope that things were going to change, because Cindy would go from being, whiny, needy, clingy to independent and okay. So he was holding on to those good times, and then she'd go back to, I don't want you to go out. I want us to hang out together. It's only me and you. And finally he's like, okay, she's not changing. It's only these brief flashes of change. I can't live like this. And so they ended up breaking up and going their separate ways. So the next example she gives is of Sally, Martha, and Jim. Sally's mother. So Martha and Jim are married, and Sally is Martha's mother. The mother, Sally, used guilt, obligation, and unfair expectations to control Sally. And if Martha, the mother, had the expectation that they would have dinner at her house every Friday night, and if they didn't, then there was an icy hell to pay. So Martha would stop calling during the week, or if she did talk, she was very short, very curt. There was an icy chill, and Sally was really walking on a lot of eggshells. Jim started to become resentful at Martha's manipulation, as he wanted to spend time with his family on some of the weekends. So then Jim starts withdrawing and becoming surly and sulking. Sally felt caught between them. Her mother had a bunch of excuses as to why they needed to spend time at her house and why they couldn't all spend time together. She would say some of her concerns were that they always had dinner at her house on Friday night, and that Jim's family had a big family and that they couldn't all fit in her house, and that she didn't know all of them and she wouldn't feel comfortable going over to their house, and that they were breaking tradition, and on and on. When Sally became pregnant, Martha's control escalated, and that was when Sally realized she needed to do something. Then getting into therapy, she realized that her primary loyalty needed to be to her own family first, so her husband and her child, and her secondary family second. She stood her ground and did not give in to her mother's crying. When her mother called a few days later, she told her mother that the guilt wasn't going to work and did the broken record routine, that she could join them at her house for dinner with the other relatives. When Sally learned to hold her ground, and she eventually got rid of much of the guilt, and her mother ended up realizing, okay, it's either the game has changed. Either the mother meets them at their house for dinner or they don't see them at all. So her mother ended up changing, and that situation at least became more smoothed out. Okay, and then the other example here is of Arnie and Francine. Arnie and Francine are both real estate brokers. However, Arnie was very well established, making lots of money, and Francine was brand new. So Arnie had approached her one day and said, hey, you know what? I think let's be partners. I really want to spend more time with my wife and kids, and I can get all the business if you can basically close all the deals. And so Francine just thought, well, that's fantastic. That seems fair. You know, I'm a new agent. I have a lot to learn, and he's very well established with all of his clientele. So they decide that she would be on a probationary period to make sure that this was actually going to be a good fit for both of them. But they didn't define how long the probationary period was going to be. So then Francine is finding herself working long hours, every night. She's working weekends, and she's not getting any money from this. And so the months start to pass, and she's like, okay, well, doesn't really want to rock the boat, because she's like, this is such an amazing opportunity, and I don't want to upset Arnie by having this conversation. But at the same time, like, how long is this going to go on for? And so then one day the phone rings, and of course she answers it, and it's his wife asking, hey, is Arnie there? And she's really caught off guard, because she thought Arnie was at home spending time with his wife and kids. So she ends up confronting, well, then she kind of realizes, okay, I think maybe he's, cheating on his wife, and something squirrely is going on. So she has a talk with him later on that next week and says, hey, let's talk about this probationary period, and kind of what are you thinking, and how long is this going to go on for? And he gets really upset, starts yelling at her, how dare you? Anybody else would love to be in your position. You're thankless. You're pushing it. I've worked decades to get where I'm at. And what, you think you're just going to walk in here and within 3 months, take over my business? You're delusional. You've got the problem. your expectations are ridiculous. And so, Francine kind of backed down a little bit, feeling very embarrassed and not sure. And then other people in the office began talking to her, and they're like, you know what? This guy's a known womanizer. They thought that she was sleeping with him too. And so then she kind of realized that this is probably never going to result in a partnership. And even if it does, it's not going to be a good one, because this guy has already shown, that he's a liar and a cheater, and he doesn't really have a solid moral compass. And so he's not the person that she would want to go into business with. So, and of course she's getting upset because here he is lecturing her about trust and loyalty. And when he's off cheating on his wife and using her, and, like the guy has no concept of what trust and loyalty is. So she decides to go ahead and just end their partnership, that it's never going to result in what she's wanting. And she has to give up the fantasy that maybe things can be saved, and maybe she can kind of just walk into making, a lot of money. So kind of fast forward, she credits this experience as a wake-up call of her being naive, and goes on to join another team of brokers, becomes successful. And Arnie goes on to be sued for sexual harassment by another broker, and his wife divorced him. So I thought those were some good examples of possibly more subtle forms of manipulation. Okay, let me... Lila says, oh, mine had no problem with counseling. It was all for me. After all, I have the problem. Yeah, and that can really get to be really mess with the person's head, especially if you have a therapist who doesn't see what's going on. Okay, let me see. I'm scrolling up here. XOK XOK says people are talking about narcissists who are lower on the scale are able to recognize something is wrong with them, but they still can't be cured. And here's the thing with that is that a person, any of us, are generally motivated by pain. Where, Tony Robbins says it so well. He says, we're either motivated by inspiration or desperation. We're either motivated by pain or motivated by pleasure. And pain is a much bigger motivator than pleasure is for most people. And we've all experienced this, right? Like you have that wake up call, like you see a photo at a friend's wedding and you're like, oh my God, I've gained a lot of weight. Like, when did this happen? And then boom, you're motivated to, okay, things are going to start changing. Like I'm going to start changing how I eat starting now. And you're motivated. Or you go to your bank account and you realize you bounced the check and you're like, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing here. Like I need to really get on track with this. Or something really painful happens and it snaps a person into action. The problem with manipulative people, with narcissists in particular, or sociopaths, is that they don't really experience pain from their actions. So if a person doesn't, because in their mind, they're entitled to treat other people the way that they want to treat them, and they spin reality to suit that level of entitlement. So if they're not experiencing, everybody else experiences pain from their actions, but for them, it's all about them all of the time. And they just keep rewriting reality on the fly in order to fit their narrative. And you're not dealing with the person that's in reality. And if a person's not sincerely accountable for their behavior, they're like a million miles away from changing it. So if they're still blaming other people, like the example I commonly give of like, oh, you forgot, if a person forgets to buy cat food at the grocery store and then the abusive person starts yelling them or uses that as an excuse to yell at them, cheat on them, hit them, whatnot. Like in the abusive person's mind, they're like, well, but she, he or she deserved it because she forgot cat food. Like but the reality is it's like, no, that still doesn't justify getting yelled at, name called, cheated on, hit, what have you. Mature people or might get frustrated by that, but they don't go bananas over something like that. So, but that's the thing. So when you're dealing with a person who doesn't experience any pain from their actions, they might experience momentary pain from consequences. They're like, man, I don't want to get divorced. I don't want to go to jail. They can do a great job at like crocodile tears and saying all the right things, but it's all just a manipulation, because if they really had that empathy and remorse, they wouldn't have done that stuff to begin with. So there's a big problem if we're trying to teach another adult kind of the basics of adult behavior. This is stuff that most people have figured out by the time that they're like in second grade. So if you're dealing with an adult who doesn't understand like when they're flirting and why it's wrong to steal somebody's car and that it's a problem, like you really shouldn't name call and put other people down and shove and hit and kick and bite. I mean, this is, again, kids have this down by really even younger than second grade. So there's a problem, and us even having solid boundaries and calling them out, that's not going to change that. Like that person's stuck they had the emotional maturity of like a 6-year-old, an awful bratty 6-year-old. And that's nothing that's going to probably realistically ever get resolved in their lifetime. Frankly, they would have to really do an awful lot of work and experience an awful lot of consequences in order to get through to them that this is not okay. It's just this, it's the same, right? If a child does something that's inappropriate, there's consequences. And then they learn, hey, you can't do that, or there's consequences. The problem with an adult is other adults tend to not have power over them, right? Like with a child, you can say, hey, you know what? No technology for the rest of the night. Or, hey, you know what? Time out. You're going into your room for the next hour. Or, hey, we're not going to do dessert. I don't know, whatever. Like you have consequences, and you're causing them pain. Like this is, if you do X, then Y is going to happen, and it's not going to be fun. So your choices matter. But with an adult, it's really difficult to have consequences other than the consequences like of, okay, I'm leaving, like I'm divorcing you. But for the target, especially if we've made them a big part of our whole world, that seems unfair. Like, well, wait a minute. I have to leave. I have to be misplaced. I have to find housing and figure out finances and deal with children that are not handling this well. I feel like I'm being punished while they're getting away with everything. So it's just, it's a lot. So, okay, so then okay, so point number 4, let me grab some tea here. Tea is so good. Okay, point number 4, understanding the 7 different mindsets and personalities that set a person up for manipulation. Everyone is a potential target for manipulators, albeit some are more vulnerable than others. And it's important to understand your buttons of vulnerability. Understanding why manipulators manipulate may be interesting, but it's not as important as learning ways to protect yourself and to break the cycle. So a lot of us spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, what kind of narcissist are they and why are they this way? And maybe it was because of their mother and they have all of this stuff. And we're really trying to diagnose and dissect and understand their childhood and their life and why are they doing this, and on and on and on. And that's interesting, but it's really not useful. Like what's important is that we understand how to protect ourselves and how to break the cycle. Because to really have another person beautifully figured out it's interesting, but again, it's not helpful. Okay, so there's 7 main areas of vulnerability. And the best way to get into the safe zone is to identify these buttons. Not understanding them and how they play out in your own life may continue to set you up for manipulation. So the first one is the disease to please, also known as people pleasing. It may seem as though we are easygoing and work well with others, but really the continual need to please others is a problem, and ingratiating ourselves and walking on eggshells does not establish an equal relationship with others. When a person feels the compulsive need to please others, they often feel out of control with their own life. If someone needs help, it may send us into overdrive, as our self esteem is tied up in helping others. Perhaps protecting yourself from abandonment. People pleasing causes harm, taking care of everyone else at the expense of yourself so they won't leave. We might need to be seen as nice, and that niceness keeps you stuck. Too nice to confront or criticize a manipulator. Too nice to see problematic behavior for what it is. And I think that is a really big thing, because that people pleasing behavior can really fly under the radar for a lot of us, because in a lot of times it's seen as a really great quality. It's seen as compassionate and giving uh, and all. Oh, Doug. Hi, Doug. Thank you for the live stream donation. He says, oh, let me scroll up. He says, I missed yesterday because the Canadian Olympic women's hockey lost the gold last night. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He says, but congratulations to the Americans. You guys won. Sending light, love, and healing to all. Namaste. Oh, bummer. I hope it was a good game, though, at least. I didn't get a chance to watch it. I was watching the skiing and a few of the other sports over the weekend. They make it look so easy, don't they? The Olympics are really enjoyable. Although I will say, I can't watch figure skating. I get so nervous every time they do their spins because they fall so much, and I get nervous for them. Like, I don't want them to hurt themselves and fall, and it's not enjoyable for me to even watch because I get so nervous. He says Doug says it was a great game. Oh, overtime, long game. Very cool. Okay, let me. Yes. Oh, Missouri Cowboy, you're welcome. He says, in Dana's notes, she lays these 7 areas of vulnerability out beautifully. Thank you. Good. I'm glad that they help. Let me okay, so let me get back to it here. So point number 2. So people pleasing. So watching out for people pleasing and paying attention to when if we do have that compulsive need to help others, if paying attention, turning inward, and are you saying yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no? And this can be very difficult ground to navigate. I think a lot of us have been this way for a very long time, and especially the teachers, the therapists, the social workers, the nurses, the kind of caregivers of the world out there. It can be very difficult for us to sort out, when does it become a problem, because our whole life really has been, in our professional life too, has really been about helping others. And so that it can take a bit to get a person back into alignment. And I think for me, it helped really asking myself, because I like helping others. And so I had a really difficult time trying to navigate, okay, well, where is this healthy and where is this unhealthy? And what helped me was to think about it in terms of, am I saying yes when I mean yes? And am I saying no when I mean no? And if I'm saying yes when I mean no, then that's something that I need to take a step back from and examine as to why, and how I can start working towards breaking that cycle. Because a lot of this kind of stuff, this people pleasing stuff and saying yes all the time, we might have been doing this, probably have been doing this for decades. And so we might just think, oh, you know what? I'm just really go with the flow. I just get along with everybody. Everything's fine. I'm not a real big fan of, conflict and chaos. And so it might not register for us that us not having a preference and being so go with the flow is actually a problem. And it's a big problem, because then we really get out of tune with everything else in our life. Like, we don't know how we think or how we feel, because we've been so used to going along with what everybody else wants, or with what one particular person wants. So Okay, point number 2, addicted to the approval of others. There is nothing wrong with valuing the approval of others, but it becomes a problem when it feels essential to your survival. Manipulators give their targets what they crave and then they threaten to take it away. They may not come directly out and say it, but these threats of leaving can be implied. The target focuses on being nice instead of being real and are willing to do nearly anything to avoid disapproval, rejection, and abandonment. And that's a big one. So that whole like these threats of abandonment, you know, that can be subtle and it can be not so subtle. It can be things like joking about, oh, you know what, you're my starter wife, or this is my starter marriage, or oh, you know what, you're my soon to be ex-boyfriend, or like little snarky kind of planting the seeds of insecurity in the other person. Uh, kind of hinting at things like, oh, well, you better shape up, like, I or throwing the word divorce around whenever they get in a fight. That's another thing for me is, like when I was married, and that was one thing I liked about well, there were many things I liked about our marriage, but we both agreed on that. Like if we fight, that's a big bomb to drop on another person. So let's not even say that word unless we mean it, you know? So it's one of those things like if it don't throw that word around. It's not fair to the other person. It's not fair to have that used against you. I am a big fan of if you say the word divorce and you don't mean it, you better mean it, because you do that once. And if you don't mean it, I'm going to file next time, because it's holding the person emotionally hostage. And it's a very difficult way to live, because then you start walking on eggshells thinking like, well, when are they going to divorce me? So yes, not okay. Let's see. And again, that kind of stuff can be really subtle, and a person might not even realize that they're in a scramble to try to earn their partner's love or acceptance or loyalty. It can be so subtle like that. Like they might say it in a joking way, you know. So, but just being aware of that. So, okay, so the number 3 is the irrational fear of negative emotions. So, anger, aggression, hostility, conflict, and confrontation all can cause a target to walk on eggshells and to become compliant, or else there is hell to pay. Manipulators hint or show anger to control the target. Conflict avoidance is not the hallmark of a good relationship. It is a symptom of a serious problem and poor communication. I really liked that she said that. So I think, healthy relationships, people are able to bring up issues, but they're able to bring them up in a mature way of, hey, this bothers me, or, can we do something different, or we need to get on the same page with this because this is not working for me. Like there's no shame involved. There's no, um, there's no cruelty involved. Okay, let me see. Yes, Lost in Translation. That's a good example too. It says, yes, he packed his bags so often and I would beg him to stay. Yes, things like that. Postmodern says, yes, and mine held me emotionally hostage, not in a marriage, but in a relationship. And then people would be like, well, what? Is he holding a gun to your head or something? Which isn't helpful. It's very difficult for other people to understand the chains of manipulation that get formed over time. Yes. Um, Okay. So, another form of, and this is a very common one of them threatening to leave, is threatening suicide. You know, if you don't do this, or threatening to drink, or threatening to go back to using drugs, or, uh, you know, basically threatening to like ruin the relationship somehow. So threatening suicide's a big one. You know, if you don't answer the phone, if you don't get back to me, like I need you, nobody understands me like you do. I'm feeling really low right now. Like I've got a gun, or I'm just going to take a bunch of pills and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I'm a big fan of, that's not, again, that's not cool. Like that's holding another person emotionally hostage. And so I would just advise anybody, you just call 911 when something like that happens. They're the best. If they are serious, they probably aren't. But if they are, 911 is the most qualified people to handle a situation like that. So, and that has the added benefit of then the abusive person realizes, hey, I'm not playing these games anymore. So don't you dare don't tell me that you're going to threaten suicide and expect me to, you know, make my world revolve around you, come running over to you, talk to you on the phone for hours at a time, listen to your nonsense, get sucked back into this. Like I'm not playing this game. And this is something that I take seriously, and I'm going to take serious action if you make serious threats. Okay. So number 4, lack of assertiveness and inability to say no. Saying no oftentimes makes a target feel guilty or selfish. After years of saying yes, others know that we are compliant. Yes, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of time to get used to asserting ourselves. And so I guess my point with that too is to be kind to yourself while you're practicing this, and realize that a lot of learning these new skills, because it's learning something new, right? It's learning something very different. We're not going to do it all perfectly right out of the gate. And so just realizing that, and kind of having this like post game analysis where after the situation happens, and you're probably going to do this anyhow, where then you're going to, you know, you walk out of the door at work and you're like, man, why did I agree to that? Or why did I say that? Or man, you know, and so to not get so upset with yourself, but just to be like, okay, how did I handle it, and why, and how could I have handled it differently next time? I think that is so key, and to kind of get a plan in place. And it just takes practice. Okay, so number 5, no solid sense of self. This is huge, and this goes in oftentimes with people pleasing. If we don't know who we are, then odds are we also don't know our central values, and we mold ourselves to our environment. Many targets don't know who they really are or what they stand for outside of what they do for others. They often feel invisible and unseen, generally rooted in childhood, that their opinions don't matter, that they are not smart or capable, or that they are expected to bend to the will of others. I think this is very true if you have one parent who, or both parents, for people that experience this in childhood, where you feel like, man, we are one conversation away from like not having a relationship, or you feel like their love is it's very conditional and it's very dependent on you acting a certain way, then that really kind of grooms this child for later on in life. If you find yourself in other relationships like this, to act the same way. And again, not realize it. You might just think, hey, I'm really go with the flow. You don't realize that it's a problem, but it is, because there's no solid sense of self. We tend to take on, it's like that, oh, what book was that in? I think it was in that Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship book, where she talked about, then we become like the jellyfish in the jar. We just take the shape of whatever jar we're put into. If we don't know who we are, then we're molding to whatever environment or partner that we're with. So, and that can cause a lot of kind of just, I think, pathological loneliness and feelings of emptiness and sadness, because we are so out of tune with who we really are. And we might feel out of place in our own life, but not know why. And that's why, because we're molding our lives to what we need, what everybody else wants us to be, instead of turning inward and asking ourselves what we want. Okay, so number 6 is low self reliance. This is where we distrust our own judgment and reactions. We are more prone to rely on the judgment, direction, and reactions of others. We might ask other people for input, advice, and direction, which may further confuse us. And lacking confidence to make a direction leaves us feeling anxious and uncertain. This is huge. This is something that I would say pretty much everybody that's ever been through an abusive relationship goes through. And a lot of times this is due to gaslighting and being blamed for abuse, and your whole world, is radically flipped upside down. And so a person's like, I don't know, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I trust myself or trust other people or trust my judgment, trust my perception of events. Is it them or is it me? You've heard me talk a lot about that, about relationships, where if there's that chronic mental anguish going on, where you're like, is it an introspection? Is it them? Is it me? Did I do this? They're blaming me, but this feels like abuse, but I'm not sure. And maybe I deserve it. And maybe I caused it. And I don't know. And all of that, like that, anytime you're experiencing mental anguish in a relationship, like that right there it's time to go. So that's not a normal sign, and it will erode a person's sense of self and their sanity over time, especially because if they stay and if they're caught up in that introspection and they have this really persistent narcissist, this abusive person who is editing the reality on the fly, then they're taking on the jellyfish in the jar is taking on, you're taking the shape of this narcissist's reality, which is insanity. I mean, it's not even real. It's their delusional version of reality. And so then when a person gets out of all that, they're like really mixed up and they don't know which. It's like taking a magnet to a compass. Like they just don't know where their true north is and how to move forward. So the solution to that is starting to turn inward and get grounded again in your own life, and to find some peace, find some calm, find some sanity, and to stay in that place and realize, okay, that's kind of my north. That's my North Star, is feeling calm, feeling grounded, and trying to prove to yourself, like, what, how, like, just getting back in tune with how you really do feel about things and what you do think about things, and thinking about, okay, what are the people and the situations in your life that you did feel certain around or that you did feel calm around. So it's not you, it was the situation. Katharina says, oh my God, I don't want to be a jellyfish. Yeah, that was a big wake-up call, right? Of that analogy. And it's in Farah says, yes, you don't know if you're coming or going with a narcissist. That's absolutely true. And probably half the time they don't even know if they're coming or going. I mean, it's just, you're dealing with a very, twisted person with a twisted view of reality that's making things up on the fly. So it's just crazy making. That's a really great point. LP says, I used to feel guilty for watching videos like this or feel guilty for recognizing abuse. Not anymore. I'm more honest with myself now. That's huge. Good. I'm glad. I'm glad that you're feeling that way. Yeah. And I think too, a lot of people, because of these words, we all have these preconceived notions of certain words, especially emotionally charged words like abuse, right? Abuse or narcissist or sociopath or, target of abuse, things like that, that just can seem like, I don't know, man, that's a pretty heavy label. Like, I'm not sure if I'd say that really, like, or abandonment. I wouldn't say if like that really applies for me. And so people can get confused over feeling like maybe they're just being kind of too drama about stuff. Like, well, I don't know. I mean, like things were bad, but like, would I say that it was like abusive? I mean, I guess other people have had it worse. So I don't know if I'd go that far. I mean, you know, my parents had a bad childhood, but like they were, you know what I mean? Like it's easy for us to feel bad or guilty about saying, hey, you know what? This was not okay. And this was abuse. And it doesn't matter if they had a bad childhood or not. Like it's still not okay to treat other people like that and to not justify it or minimize it and to just fully embrace it and be like, yeah, you know, it was unacceptable how this happened, and to call it like it is. Yeah. Okay, point number 7 is the external locus of control. So a locus of control is how and where you attribute the cause of things that happen or don't happen to you. An external locus of control is where you don't feel in control and everything is everyone else's fault. Over time, an external locus of control causes illness, depression, and learned helplessness. An internal locus of control means you feel that you have an appropriate level of control over your own life, that your actions matter, and because of this, you have higher self-esteem. So when a person, and I think you can kind of see how all of these things are very interwoven. And they, more often than not, I think they do tend to kind of start in childhood for most people, but it's difficult when a person's been manipulated for so long and they're stuck in that web and there's multiple reasons that they're stuck. It can be very difficult for them to get out and to really just feel powerless at leaving and hopeless and helpless of anything ever changing, especially if they're thinking, if they just don't realize, okay, you can start planning a plan to leave. But that's a big jump for like a lot of people to make for a wide variety of reasons, you know, finances, children, religion, culture, you know, physical location, possible disability. Like there's just a lot of low self-esteem, low self-reliance, feeling like they're to blame. So lots of things kind of that tend to get in the way of a person developing more of that internal locus of control and to just see the situation clearly. So let me go to the chat here and see what people are saying here. Anju and Manju says, everyone I've spoken to after abuse usually feels broken, but don't want to grow. They tend to usually stay in a negative headspace. It's sad, but I feel they need to try and see the positives. Not saying it's easy. Yes. And it's difficult. So I think there's stages, there's stages of healing, like with anything else. And when a person is either discarded or they finally leave, there is oftentimes a tremendous amount of anger, appropriate anger, and they start waking up to what happened of, oh my God, I cannot believe that I was treated this way for so long and that I allowed myself to be treated like this for so long. And like, how did I get here? How did this happen? And there's just and of course they might not think that they allowed themselves to be treated like this. That might be like, no, I didn't allow this. Like I felt like I didn't have a choice. And that goes back to those feelings of helplessness of, what choice did I have? Like this person was a total psycho and, it was against my religion to leave. And I felt trapped. Like they were making my life a living hell. Maybe they were a boss at work and they were just terrified. They're like, what do I do? I can't leave. It'll ruin my career. It'll do all these things. So I was at their mercy and all I could do was really try to minimize contact and just pray that it would stop. So yeah, there is a point where and especially when people find a support group and they can start talking about what happened, I think it takes a person probably, I mean, I would say a while, probably at least a solid year, if not more, of just getting that poison out of their stomach, where they're just able to actually talk to other people that have been through something like this and feel validated, because for so long that they were blamed. And so then they're realizing, oh my God, it's not me. Like, I thought I was this awful person and that I deserved it and that I caused it. And now I'm realizing that it's not. And so they have to kind of go back piece by piece through their relationship and figure out what happened. And when they said, this, what did they really mean? And when they did this, what did they mean? And what do you guys think about, there's just a million questions that people have. And that's them trying to get a fuller picture of what happened. So I think that's a very necessary space for healing. But yes, a lot of people do tend to stay in that space for a while. One of the things that we've started doing in the support group is for the people that have moved past that space, and people tend to cycle back and forth. They have a new realization. They feel they need to go talk about it more. They need to get that anger and that rage and that all of that, those feelings out of their system, to people that understand. But we started another support group called 365 I Thrive. And that group the focus is all about us. It's our boundaries, our healing, our self-esteem, our inner child, our us, self-love, the next step. And so 2 very different groups. You guys are welcome to join both or one or the other or what have you. So, but it can help those people that are like, okay, I'm done talking about the abuser. Like, I get it now. Like, I was tangled up with them. I'm ready to move on. The 365 group is a good group to go to for that. And it's difficult too to have these kinds of conversations too about shifting from that kind of external locus of control to an internal locus of control without it feeling or coming across as victim blaming. And I totally get it. Like, I probably would have just flat out attacked somebody had they come at me with boundaries and standards and all of that stuff in either one of my situations, because I didn't see what I was getting into. Like, I just did not see it. And I didn't feel that my boundaries or standards had anything to do with the situation that I got roped into, because it was so subtle and it was just so subtle, and there was so much charm and amazingness that went along with it. It just, I don't know. So please don't take it as victim blaming at all. No, most people I think all people that find themselves in these situations don't realize what's happening. It's not your fault. It's not some sort of shortcoming within you. Doesn't necessarily mean you're codependent. But the 365 group, like I said, is a great group to work on. I think most people don't have a solid grip on this stuff to even begin with. So it's a good group to talk about boundaries and standards and deal breakers and inner child stuff, even if you feel like all of that stuff within you was fine. But if you feel like it's really not fine, I think it's for sure a good group to join. Okay. So point number 5 here on my list of 11 things is motives of manipulators. Motives of manipulators are often disguised. They misrepresent reasons for doing things. They may even be lying to themselves about their motives. They often seek the path of least resistance. They do this because it's easy, and they will often move on to a new target. Don't delude yourself into thinking that if they only knew better, that they would do better. Get a better understanding as to what you are up against, and it will help you understand why you feel so violated, diminished, and demeaned. think that is so true. And so many people do get stuck in thinking like, if I can just improve my communication, if I can just get through to them, if I tell them that they're a narcissist, we can go to therapy and, and then God forbid you get tangled up with a therapist who treats it as like a just normal couples issue and doesn't see that it's abuse. And that's a really great way to spend a lot of time and money going nowhere fast. So it is important to understand that manipulation is not normal. It's not a normal relationship issue that people have. And that there is a difference between being in a manipulationship and being in a relationship. And when we get those two things confused, there's a lot of pain that will surely follow. Okay, 3 main motives of manipulators. Number 1, to advance their own selfish agenda, even if they say otherwise. They can disguise their motives. They may tell you that they care or that they're being honest, that they are sorry, or that they have your interest at heart. Good lip service is all part of a good manipulation. They may present themselves as unselfish and caring because it works. They may even believe that they are good, kind, genuine people and that we are bad for thinking otherwise. I would say a good example of this would be Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. They used to cry every Sunday. They were big televangelists and, they would hide behind their religion. God loves you and God wants us, basically God wants you to send us your money. And they embezzled, millions, I think, from their company. But then they went on there, we're so sorry. We're just, we were lost, but now we're found, and they were crying and, and it's like, and people fell for it. But I'm a big fan of when somebody shows you their true colors, especially to that extreme. That's not a mistake. That's not like a moral slip up. That's intentional. For like decades, they were manipulating and exploiting and embezzling funds. This wasn't, they were lost and now they're found. That's who they were. They got caught and now they're sorry because the gig is up and they're not going to have any more money. So it's important that we see this stuff for what it is and not give people second chances when stuff is outrageous like that. Okay. So number 2, the second main motive of a manipulator is a strong need to get and keep power over others. The target's compliance gives them this power. Even though the manipulator may act grandiose, arrogant, or superior, these are ways that they compensate for low self-esteem. They may have contempt for people like themselves. This is often the case with bullies who target those who have traits that they don't like about themselves. They view power as finite. They can't let others be empowered because it represents less power for them. There's no room for a win-win situation. If you seek to exert power over yourself or over your decisions, the manipulator views it as you taking power away from them. And now you have become the enemy. They will most likely become retaliatory to regain control. So another example of people this has been a really common one on the news probably in the past year or so, people that have contempt for people like them, is you see a lot of very kind of staunch conservative people out there that are very anti-gay. And then it turns out, they've been getting gay escorts and that they are gay, or, so it's like they're very anti-gay because they don't like the fact that they themselves either are gay or have homosexual tendencies. So abusive people, it's very common. They oftentimes have really low self-esteem. Normal, healthy people with normal, healthy self-esteem don't feel the need to go around grinding other people down. They don't. Normal, healthy self-esteem comes from a place of like, why not you? Why not me? Like, we can both, live our dreams and do our things, but unhealthy self-esteem takes a person. These are like the internet trolls of the world. These are the narcissists, the sociopaths, those that bully and degrade and grind other people down, and because it makes them feel smug and superior. So odds are, if you are being ground down, especially in ways that would be seen as the other people would be like, what? Like, that's crazy. If a person's incredibly attractive and they're being told that they're ugly, or they are, a real professional person and obviously intelligent, being told that they're stupid. Like, that kind of stuff is coming from a person with low self-esteem, because they're targeting things that are exceptional about that person and trying to grind them down. Okay, let's see here. Scrolling through the chat here. Cha. There's like so much conversation going on in the chat. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. Healthy Love says, she says, I missed a lot. Did you talk a bit about being afraid of conflict? I did. And that I think most people tend to be uncomfortable with conflict, right? I think, I don't think it's just us. I think most normal people, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary, and it's an important part of life that we learn how to be assertive and how to handle conflict, and like a healthy conflict resolution kind of way, where ideally that it can be a win-win situation, or at least we can agree to disagree and then go our separate ways, kind of a thing. And again, that goes back to understanding like where a person's deal breakers are, because if we just agree to disagree and then go our separate ways, then if that falls into deal breaker territory for you, then and that's okay, then to realize, okay, then what's the next step? Like, if we're going to agree to disagree, then what do I need to do? Because, but yeah, it's difficult. Healthy Love is saying, yes, my therapist is working with me on it. It's like pulling teeth. It is. It can be very uncomfortable. There's an exercise of the whole, I was called like empty chair, where you basically pretend. You can pretend either way. Like, you can, I think sometimes it helps to pretend like the abusive person or the difficult person is in the chair, and that you're telling them everything that you want to say to them. And sometimes that can feel good just to get it out of your system, but then it can also be helpful to kind of role play that situation. And if you're working with a therapist, it can be helpful too for you to pretend to role play with them the situation. And so you pretend that you're the abusive person and they pretend to be you. So because you know the abusive person best, and so that way they can help give you some strategies for, okay, how can I address this, and how can I handle this in a different way, So so yes, we're talking about a strong need to get and keep power and control over others. And okay, so point number 3, they want and need to feel in control. This loss of control makes them feel anxiety. They want to be seen as in control of their emotions, especially those emotions associated with anxiety, such as vulnerability, which includes bonding with others and thus love. Pathological need, they have a pathological need to control others because they could struggle with control over themselves. They need to be right, and gray areas make them nervous. If examining their own emotions causes them anxiety, then they won't turn inward to examine those emotions, and they won't allow themselves to connect with others in ways that makes them vulnerable. The result of this is that they have superficial emotions. So, for example, how we love our iPhone is how they love their spouse or their child. Like, there's just no depth there. In other words, a normal person's 10% is their 100%. Their emotional buckets are not deep, and many narcissists take great pride in this and view this as a strength. This is very true. So vulnerability for them is weakness. And you might hear, I think more so with, I don't know, probably more so with male narcissists, but that might not be the case, that are very proud of, we use logic and reason, we use science, we use facts. And, women are just overly emotional and, in their mind, it's emotions play no part in anything valid. And that, to me, that's a really clear sign that that person's been abused at some point in their life, because that's not a healthy approach. That's not an integrated approach to understanding life, other people, themselves. Like, our emotions are there for a reason. They bring us messages. They help us to decipher our internal and our external environment. Like, they're important. So there's a reason we have the limbic system. And logic and reason is great, but it's only a part of our brain. It's when we can get all of our brain working together that's when we're, and I think truly self-aware person. So if we're only using logic and reason, like, we're missing a lot. Then we become like Spock. And if you're familiar with Star Trek, like, Spock continually misread situations and misread people because he was only going based off of logic and reason. But a big part of life is that emotional intelligence and that emotional awareness. It's key. It's key to understanding, to appropriately reading people and reading situations. So I think that's a big red flag, is when people have placed no value in emotions whatsoever. XOK says, awesome description, Dana. Thank you. That's not an integrated response. It gives us no reason to make excuses for this stuff, regardless of gender. Yes. Yes. So it's important. There was a video, you could probably find it on YouTube, of a little boy. He was probably 6. And I don't know where in the world they were, but maybe Africa or someplace like that. And he was saying, he had an accent, maybe Jamaica, I don't know, he had an accent. And he was saying, he's like, look at me, no weakness. There is no weakness here. I am strong. And people were laughing about it. And I just was watching that video, just thinking, like, this kid has been really abused. And where is he getting this from? And how tragic, because you can just look at this kid and you're like, unless this kid gets some serious intervention soon, he's going to become abusive. And he has no shot. He has no shot in life, because he's so angry, and he views any emotion of vulnerability at any kind as weakness. And a person like that's never going to have healthy relationships with other people. So it's sad. Manju asks, can you explain CODA meetings? I go to them, and somebody in here was asking, and I know you can help. LOL. Sorry for the caps. CODA meetings stands for Codependence or Codependency Anonymous. And they are meetings that really address kind of boundaries and standards. And I don't know, I have mixed, I used to be a big fan of CODA meetings, and I went to one, I don't know, but a few months ago, and I was not a fan. So I feel like, but it's something. Like, there's not a lot of free stuff out there for people. And I would say, if you're going to go to a group like that, Al-Anon, CODA, hold on to what helps and let the rest go. So boundaries, standards, that kind of stuff. There's some of the 12-step, there's probably actually quite a few of the 12-step stuff that I'm not a fan of. And especially when it comes to codependency, because I think this stuff just doesn't take a lot for it to get blurred and then for a person to be lost in that fog again. But one of the concerns I have with one of the steps is, basically making an honest, searching moral inventory of ourselves and owning up to our wrongdoings of how our codependency has hurt other people. And that can send a person back into that shame and embarrassment cycle. Is it me? Did I cause this? Could I have stopped it? All of that. So I just like, I think it concerns me. If a person, I'm trying to think I liked the book Codependency for Dummies by Darlene Lancer that we read. Was it last month? I think that was a pretty good overview on codependency. Al-Anon is another group that also talks about generally with dealing with having a family member that's an alcoholic, but they also talk a lot about, healthy boundaries and enmeshment and enabling and this kind of stuff and stopping that and kind of who's responsible for what and getting rid of those blurred boundaries and having having a healthy sense of like, okay, you're an adult, you're in control of you. I'm an adult, I'm in control of me, not being held emotionally hostage, not being manipulated, not getting dragged through all of that. But so, yeah. Okay. I agree, Kevin, 100%. Kevin says we need a group without the 12 steps that's free. I agree. I'm 100% with you. It's something, the 365 I Thrive group is something that I've modeled. My goal with that is to model that after the 12-step program, because there's things that they have done that work. And so that's where I would like to see that group go to, is something that's free, something that's worldwide, something that's a more empowered focus. That's another issue I have with 12-step groups, is it talks about, that you don't have control. Like you've got to admit that you're powerless. And it's like, well, actually, no, that's the problem. Like with this kind of stuff is we need to realize that you do have power and that you can reclaim it and that you are in control of your life, and with these tools, you can get yourself back into alignment. So that's a massive undertaking, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that group grows. I would be all for making that or any part of this into a nonprofit and kind of going with it. Anju says 365. What? 365 I Thrive. So 365 I Thrive. And it's right now it's just a Facebook group. I used to, I should probably check to see. I bought the domain like a while ago. I should go buy it. If it's not already taken, I don't know. Maybe it is. I will have to check. And see if, I don't know. I have all these ideas all the time. And then I buy domains and I don't do anything with them. And then crazy. So, okay, back to my notes and then I'll figure all that out. Yeah, Shannon Wallace says, Dana, well, isn't the powerlessness feeding into the victim mentality? She says, yeah, I'm so happy that you said that. Thank you. Yes, I agree. There's a lot of things in there that I don't agree with, and that being one of them. I don't think that a person needs to find a higher power in order to change. It helps. I mean, I consider myself agnostic. I leaned very heavily on my relation. I feel like I have a very good relationship with God, and I really relied on that heavily when I was going through all of that. So that meant a lot to me. But you know, I think I think it turns a lot of atheists off, and a lot of people that might have gone through spiritual abuse, and they're not on good terms with God. And so it concerns me. I don't like that tenet of being like, well, you have to believe in, a God of your higher power. I don't know, that it's just, I don't think that's necessary. So a lot of things that I would do different. That's interesting. I did not know that. Missouri Cowboy says in an interview with Patrick Carnes, he was on YouTube, he discusses the changes he thinks need to occur in the 12-step meetings due to the knowledge we now have in addictive and compulsive behaviors. I will have to check that out. And I think too, the focus of, so another thing, another focus that I would like to see more in 12 steps is when I used to work with kids, I used to work at a group home, and it was this alternative to juvenile hall. So we had a lot of kids that had committed a lot of like pretty heinous crimes, and we would take them to AA and NA, and it tended to be a lot of people that were still kind of, didn't seem to be like a whole lot of forward momentum there. Like there, and I get it, and there's no judgment, it's a hard thing to kick an addiction of any kind. And I think kind of the beauty is that there's people in all stages of understanding and healing, which can be really helpful. But I think it was really depressing for a lot of the kids. And it was like, they didn't want that. They're like, oh my God, this is going to be my life if I get sober, and this is no fun, and I don't want to be like this. So I think having a more positive spin of, this isn't just about, not drinking or not doing drugs or not being in an abusive relationship. This is about finding yourself, man. This is about living your life and thriving and having an amazing life. It's not about being, like I said, not about just not drinking or not being in an abusive relationship. It's the next step to that. So, Healthy Love saying, I feel like I'm getting the flu. I got to go. Okay. Well, take care, and we will see you next week. I'll probably see you in the group before then. And hopefully I'll have my book next time I talk to you. But at the same time, there is a lot that there's a lot of stuff that the 12 steps does that I do like. Like, I like the fact that it's free. I like the fact that it's worldwide. I like the fact that it's anonymous. I like the fact that there's different types of groups out there. I like the fact that they have they have kind of these guiding principles, which, if you look at it, there's very few groups that have been able to remain true to form. Like, they haven't changed a whole lot since they were founded. So they're doing a lot of things right, because, groups like this, it can get taken to, really get pulled away from what their core message is about. And so I like the fact that they're very simple. Like, with Alcoholics Anonymous, it's like, we're here to quit drinking. That's what we're about. It's not about people. It's not about personalities. It's about getting sober. And, with Coda, it's not about personalities. It's about us getting healthy and us learning boundaries and having healthy relationships. And so there's things that I like about them. So don't get me wrong there. Yeah, Anju saying, I just listen to some stuff, but that's what I take what helps and I leave the rest. Yes, and Postmodern saying the 12 steps are fine, but just not for people who haven't recovered from abuse. I would agree. I would agree. And Lila says, yes, AA people often divert it to another addiction, and that's any addict, whether it's Overeaters Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous or Gamblers Anonymous, because it's not the alcohol that's the problem. It's not the food that's the problem. It's not the gambling that's the problem. It's the need, the deeper need that's serving. And that is strange to me. It's a very controversial thing to say because people are like, no, it's that one thing, but it's not. And when a person stops that one thing, then boom, 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 other things tend to surface. Like there's a saying that addictions tend to run in threes. There's a lot of truth to that. It's like you see a person, they gamble, they smoke, and they drink. Or, they drink and they have a sex addiction and they, I don't know, spend too much money, or they work too much, or what have you. There's other things that are also really out of balance in their life. And it's addressing those deeper needs. And until that stuff's, and this is people have gastric bypass, they gain the weight back, right? They struggle with eating disorders their whole life. And, like those shows like The Biggest Loser and what have you, most of the time they gain all that weight back because it's not about calories in, calories out. It's not about what they're eating. It's about what's eating them. And until that's addressed, that stuff's going to continue to surface. It might not surface with weight gain, but it's going to surface in another area because that's how our brain works. So, we are only as healthy as the way that we cope. And when we learn better coping mechanisms, then the healthier we get. But oftentimes we don't realize that the way we're coping isn't healthy until things get to be so extreme that we can't deny it anymore. Sort of like I was talking earlier about, then you see a picture of yourself at a friend's wedding and you're like, oh my God, I've gained 50 pounds. When did that happen? Or you get a second DUI and you're like, well, maybe I do have a drinking problem because you're going to jail. Or something pretty major happens that it's a wake-up call of, I thought this was the first time was a fluke, or that I justified it, but now it's really a problem. Like now I need to do something. Okay. Ferris says, hi, Dana. How do I help a family member who has been recently through narcissistic and emotional abuse? It seems that she can't get over it, and she had attracted this person into her life. Well, I would say if you could, it's going to be difficult. She's going to need to get help herself. And so if she's open to watching YouTube videos, I would encourage her. There's a lot of channels out there that discuss this. Mine is one of them, but there's a lot. I think you can look on my homepage and there's a whole list of recommended channels that I have that are on this topic. So I would encourage her to start watching some videos. And if she's interested in that, then odds are she will take to that like a fish out of water, because it's going to give her a lot of validation and clarity that she's probably been looking for a long time. So I would, like I said, I'd point her in the direction of some YouTube videos. And, we have a live stream every single Wednesday night here at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it runs for about 3 hours. There's about, I don't know, 150 people or so that are in the chat at any given time that are answering questions and giving each other support, and people are asking me questions and I'm reading questions, and it's a whole thing. So that can be a really great start for her. Okay. So where am I? Point number. Okay, so I addressed point number 3, which is they want and they need to feel in control. emotions, especially any emotions that they associate with vulnerability, which by default includes bonding with other people, although they might not realize that. They avoid emotions like that. They just have kind of flipped that switch subconsciously, where they just don't attach because attachment equals pain to them. And she says, manipulators don't often change. They just change tactics and targets. And this is so true. And this is something that I've talked about a lot, where when you're dealing with an emotion, with a manipulative person, it's a lot like that game Whack-A-Mole. If you remember that game from Showbiz Pizza or Chuck E. Cheese, whatever it was called when you were younger, or if you have kids and you go there now, where there was a little mole that would pop up and you had a little mallet and you would whack it on the head and then you got points. That's how you would win the game, is you'd whack this mole. But every time you whacked it, another one would pop up. And it would pop up and it would pop up and it would pop up. And that's exactly what it is when you're dealing with a manipulative person. You might address that one behavior, but it's going to surface in a different way because it's not necessarily that specific behavior that's the problem. It's their mindset. So like the example that she gave earlier in the book about who was it? Shelley and Jim and Martha, or Sally, Jim, and Martha, the husband and wife with the manipulative mother. I guarantee you that's not the only situation that the mother was manipulating them. There's probably many other times. And so you can address that one issue, but you've got to have your radar set to scan of like, okay, well then what other ways is this coming up? And then continue to address it time and time again. If you're dating somebody or you're married to somebody, it's a lot. I think it's easier to leave, obviously, a person that you're dating versus calling off a relationship with your mother. But I think it's important to just realize what you're in for. So if they're having bad behavior in one area, it's going to come out in all different kinds of ways. It's not just that one thing that's the issue. It's the mindset that's driving that. That's the issue. And that anybody's mindset, it's pervasive. It's a big part of who they are. So, and it's difficult. It's difficult for people to change, difficult for us to change too. Okay. And okay, so we also must give up the fantasy of a great relationship with them and the false hope that maybe this time they are different. Continuing to have hope based on nothing more than empty promises and fleeting actions is a form of denial. If you want your life to work, and if you want to regain your power, you must start seeing situations and people clearly, not based on how we hope they might be, not based on who they pretended to be, not based on what they said that they're going to be, but based on what is really going on, how their actions really, really are. Okay. Point number 6, how to regain control and stop the insanity, is basically stop rewarding their tactics. Manipulation exists because it works. You must change your own behavior and how you relate to them. You may not want to lose the relationship, but the cost may be losing yourself in the process. Any relationship that is costing you your dignity, your sense of self, or your self-esteem is not worth being in. I will just make that very clear. It's really not. And it's difficult to try to change our behavior and how we relate to them because they can escalate and it is so uncomfortable and they can be so aggressive and use a lot of guilt and fear and obligation and pity and all kinds of things. So it helps to really prepare yourself for what you're going into. Okay, so point number 7. So knowing what manipulation is and how it feels. And I have in here in my notes, I really think that it's a lot easier to notice how manipulation feels as the mismatch between a manipulator's words and actions, as well as the emotional investment in a person or situation, really contributes to that cognitive dissonance and confusion. So it can be difficult for a person to be like, hey, I'm being manipulated. It can be a lot easier to be more in tune with those feelings because it starts off as confusion. It grows into introspection. Is it me? Is it them? What's going on? Am I to blame? Do they have the problem? That. So, confusion, introspection, and that continues to grow. And then it's that whole host of uncomfortable feelings of, frustration, irritation, anger, resentment, um, the kind of impending sense of doom. You're walking on eggshells. You're feeling physically ill. You're concerned about having important conversations with them. You feel kind of like your relationship could be over at any time if you bring up a topic, or that you're a bad person if you hold your ground. But then you might also think like, I don't, it's only kind of with this person. Like, I don't think I would have this issue. It would be this difficult having this conversation with somebody else. So those are all warning signs that you're being manipulated and something was really off. Okay. Manipulators control communication. They may ignore a comment or question. They may stonewall, yell, argue, or give silent treatment. Or, like in the case with the manipulative mother, be incredibly icy and brief. And you just realize, ooh, okay, something's changed in here. And I don't know what happened, but now there's a chill in the air, kind of a thing. All of this creates mounting frustration and resentment, and these feelings become internalized, contributing to the emotional harm of the target. The target often feels they can never make the manipulator happy as the volume of their unmet needs grows, and these needs become more exaggerated and pressing. The relationship only serves the needs of the manipulator. If the target connects their self-worth to the manipulator's willingness to change or not change, erosion of self-esteem happens. They tend to feel controlled or out of control, demeaned, exploited, anxious, or depressed. Prolonged frustration leads to aggression. People tend to revolt on a personal or social level. The target may be suppressing their anger and may redirect it in other ways, onto themselves, onto others, by being critical, hostile, irritable, etc. They become like the abuser. They may feel trapped in a situation of either I do what they want or they suffer intolerable consequences. They turns into hopelessness, despair, guilt, shame, low self-esteem. The more victimized a person feels, the less they feel able to have power over themselves or their life. As they become more diminished, they become more vulnerable to manipulation in the future due to the 7 buttons that we mentioned earlier. Okay. And then she says, see manipulation for what it is. Manipulation is a lot like a magic trick. Once you see how it works, the mystery is gone, and the less likely you will be to get caught up in it. Tactics are usually changed up over time, and skilled manipulators are like vultures, and they can sense vulnerability. And so some of the ways that they go about manipulating are through charm, silent treatment, coercion. Let's see. Guilt, authority, debasement, regression, which is like pouting, sulking, whining. Okay. And this is a big one. Understanding the hooks of manipulation. The reason manipulation works is there's some sort of hook. There's some sort of gain down the road. It's the pull. So, she breaks it down. It's either there's gain or reward, or there's loss or avoidance. There's a promise of something of value to gain, whether it's a promotion, maybe this time they're going to get sober, they're going to give us love, we're going to have a happy relationship. The carrot is dangled. We call this future faking. Ask how your behavior is being controlled. Are you acting of your own free will, or are you acting out of fear of losing what you have? And then she goes into that's point number 8. 6 basic ways or hooks manipulators use to control their targets. So number 1, positive reinforcement. They provide reward for good behavior, approval, affection, attention. It can be gifts, facial expressions, recognition. This can be material or non-material. So just approval overall. Negative reinforcement, nagging, yelling, threatening, belittling, people being controlled in this way tend to become angry and resentful. Number 3, intermittent reinforcement. The target looks for the reward, walks on the eggshells. Sometimes the behavior is rewarded, sometimes it isn't. They may develop addictive and compulsive behaviors. The reward is the fix or the hit, and it keeps a person going. So maybe the person lies and cheats and steals, and say, I'm going to get into therapy or rehab, things are going to be different. I love you. And it's like a switch flipped. And all of a sudden they seem fine. And the target's like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that we had all these issues in our relationship. And I also, if it just took this like one conversation, and now they're on the, now everything seems fine. And now finally I have the relationship that I always hoped I could have. But what really is going on is that intermittent reinforcement. It's the honeymoon cycle all over again. I'm back. When did I lose you guys? I wonder. Oh boy. Let's see. Are you guys here? Okay. We're here. We're good. Yes. Okay. I see postmodern. Okay, good deal. So, okay, number 4, the 4th basic hook is silent treatment and consequences. The number 5 is traumatic one trial learning. She gives the example of a hand on a hot burner. You touch a hot stove, you learn real quick, you don't do that. And this is also grooming. So targets or abusive people will use fear oftentimes to groom and control the target. The target learns to never do that one thing again. So you might come downstairs wearing a sexy outfit and they'll say something really shaming, or, you look like a whore, and, blah, blah, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Right. And the target learns really quick. Oh my God, they're just hurt. Like, oh, I was trying to be sexy for you. And then they're like, well, I'm never doing that again. Never dressing sexy again because you think I'm cheating on you or that I look like a whore. So, painful. Okay, number 6, the big lie. This is huge. This is the seduction story. This is the promise of what we all want. This is the carrot that's dangled in front of us. The target gives and gives and gives only to never get, or if they do, okay, that they only never get. They give and give and give only to never get. If they do what the manipulator wants, they will, in their mind, they think that we'll eventually have this amazing relationship, which is back to the idealized stage. And it's important to realize that this is a seduction story. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's a mirage. It will not last. It will not last because nothing else in this relationship is real. It's not built on a foundation of mutual trust and support. It's built on a foundation of lies, and it's built on a foundation of intensity. And intensity is not the same thing as sincerity, and it's not real. And that's a really hard truth to come to, believe me. It took me years to fully wrap my head around that. But it's a lot like getting caught up with like an online dating scammer. The sooner you can see, like, they're telling you everything that you want to hear because they're after your money or they're after something. The sooner you can see it, the sooner you can break free from it. Okay. And then point number 9, know who the manipulators are in your life. And she talks about those that manipulate on a regular basis tend to either have a personality disorder or an extreme personality, which frankly, I would say it's personality disorder, or that they are an addict or an alcoholic, or it's both. A person can have a personality disorder as well as being an addict or an alcoholic. So she talks about kind of the usual suspects with manipulative people. She goes into narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, passive aggressive behavior in general. And so we'll just kind of run through those real quick. So, narcissistic personality disorder, it's a person has a really inflated self-image. They're entitled. They're unaware of the needs of others. They expect special favors and treatment from others without wanting to do anything in return. These are very one-sided and problematic relationships. They're arrogant, aloof, cold, and selfish. They have a blinding degree of selfishness and arrogance. They may be delusional and think that they are gods in their own world. And I would say this whole concept of expecting special favors and treatment from others without wanting to do anything in return, because that seems kind of nebulous, right? Like, what does that really mean? The way that I interpret that is they expect you should forgive me. You should take me back. You should do for me, even though my behaviors never warranted it, right? Like, they might cheat and lie and steal and abuse and be in jail and all kinds of stuff. And then they're just shocked that you're not taking their phone calls or that you're not wanting to talk to them. And it's like, what? Like, it's outrageous, the expectations that they have of that other people would continue to, give second and 20-second chances and allow them just these outrageous things, trying to move in, they're cheating on you and they try to move in the person that they're cheating on you with, or just really extreme, outrageous, that kind of stuff, special favors or treatment. James says, yes, how dare you not take me back and give me chance number 300. Yes, like that kind of stuff. You're breaking up this family. How could you do this? What about forgive and forget? What kind of Christian are you? And I said, I'm sorry. I mean, you're the one that's dwelling in the past. Like, all that kind of nonsense and garbage. And it can be easy for a person to start feeling bad. Like, well, maybe I do owe them another chance and maybe I should, but then it's just, it just messes with the person's head. But yeah, you don't owe a person multiple second chances for stuff. And if the only sincere apology is changed behavior. Anything else is just lip service, and talk is not only cheap, it's free. So, okay, borderline personality disorder. People with borderline personality disorder have a constantly changing self-image. They have an intense and chaotic life, tumultuous relationships. They go from idealized to devalue, tend to be needy, terrified of being abandoned, hypersensitive to rejection, angry and emotional tantrums. They often use emotional blackmail, oftentimes threatening suicide, and have indirect or direct threats if they don't get what they want. And then I put in there, if you have been, it's very common for people to get diagnosed as borderline personality disorder after an abusive relationship. And it is not, I strongly, Pete Walker talks about this too, and I agree 100%. I strongly think there's a lot of overlap between PTSD and borderline personality disorder. And I've worked with patients that have had, I would say, true borderline personality disorder. And it's, I can see how it could be seen as similar, but it's really not. Like, people that have been traumatized they're not manipulative. They're not playing games. They might have constantly changing self-image. They might have a real fragmented sense of identity. tumultuous relationships, terrified of being abandoned, hypersensitive to rejection, poor emotional control. But that's the PTSD. They're not manipulative. They're not threatening suicide. They're not like, I don't know. So to me, there's two very different things going on there, and that's something that the DSM doesn't really cover. But I was glad to hear Pete Walker touch on that too, because I think it is an important distinction. Because I think a lot of people are diagnosed as borderline personality disorder, and then that sends them back into that cycle of, oh my God, it was me all along. And shame and embarrassment and guilt and all of those feelings, when it's not. Like, it's how they're reacting is a very normal way to react after emotional and psychological abuse. So, okay, dependent personality disorder. This is where a person has an excessive need to be taken care of. They tend to be submissive and clingy, helpless, needy. They need approval, emotional support. They can't make their own decisions. They're not responsible for their behavior. They have failed to learn age-appropriate decision-making. They're childish, immature. They will fake ineptitude to get other people to take care of them. They get anxious when they're left alone. They're reliant upon others for forward momentum in life. They oftentimes won't disagree or express anger because they need to be taken care of and they don't want to rock the boat. With people like that, and there's a big difference between dependent personality disorder and being codependent. Dependent comes across as very, very immature and sort of like almost like Peter Pan type syndrome. And of course, men and women can both be like that, where they're very immature. They really do need to be taken care of. They tend to go from partner to partner. Their relationships tend to be that of like, they're the child, their partner's the adult, and they tend to not last, because then the partner tends to burn out and they're like, I thought this person was cute or funny or what have you, but now I feel like I've got another child in my house and I'm taking care of them. They can't stand on their own 2 feet. They have terrible decision-making skills. They, I feel like their parent, and that's gross, because then it feels like this weird incestual relationship, and it's just, it can be really strange. So, okay, histrionic. These people are dramatic and theatrical. They're excessively emotional and melodramatic. They have rapid shifts in emotion that seem immature and irrational. I would say the vast majority of their behavior seems immature and irrational. It's intense craving for attention, often dresses flamboyantly, is sexual and seductive. I would say all of their behavior these are the drama queens out there. It's just very over the top. You like, it's so extra. It's so much. They must be the center of attention. They use emotional explosions to get their way. They really are theatrical. I would say a character from TV that really fits this well would be Peg Bundy from Married with Children. Would probably be a good example of that. Trying to think of some other. I think Marilyn Monroe, they had kind of pegged her as histrionic. Although I don't know if I agree with that, because I think there was a lot of other stuff in her life. I don't know. Peg Bundy, I think, would probably be the best example I can think of. Very sexual, very flirty, very attention seeking, very manipulative. If she didn't get her way, she asserted herself through her sexuality and was very passive aggressive when she didn't get her way. Okay, passive aggressive. This can come across as, and I think a lot of people that have that struggle with codependency also tend to have a lot of passive aggressive behavior. So this can be interesting to see this if you see this within yourself. So forgetfulness, dawdling, procrastination, stubbornness, intentional inefficiency. They might complain to others about demands others have made to them. They might whine, complain, sulk, but they don't address issues directly. They resist demands through passive means. They might go to an event and then become withdrawn and sullen. When it's brought up, they act shocked. They often have a lot of passive resistance, which evokes frustration and hostility in others and often within themselves. Passive aggressive behavior is a common tool for those who are unable to get their needs met by being assertive. Targets of abuse and spouses of addicts and alcoholics often become passive aggressive because it is their perceived way of either getting their needs met or to settle the score with the person that they feel controlled by. So, for example, if they might agree to something that they don't want to do and then call in sick to get out of it, or they may burn their alcoholic spouse's dinner, give silent treatment, slam doors, quote unquote, forget to mail important documents or Christmas gifts on time. This is a way of expressing their anger or frustration at the alcoholic or abusive person's behavior. Okay. And she goes into antisocial personality disorder, which is also known as sociopaths and psychopaths. It's marked by being irresponsible, no concern for the rights of others or for laws, little to no guilt or remorse. There's no no conscience, emotionally and usually physically dangerous and destructive. And then addictive personalities have a pattern of lying, denial, exploiting, and wreaking havoc. Their addictions may or may not be driving this behavior. A person can have a personality disorder as well as be an addict or an alcoholic. And many times, even after an addict or an alcoholic gets clean, even if they don't have a personality disorder, they're often emotionally stunted at the age that they began using. So it's not necessarily just the alcohol or the substances that are causing the problem. They were numbing out and missed a lot of these major growth milestones that other people have. Okay, so point number 10, breaking free. In order to break free, you will need to rely on the one person you've been groomed to not trust. That is yourself. The more you distrust yourself, the harder it can be to break free. So how do you begin to trust yourself after you've been disempowered for so long? Start thinking of yourself as a warrior instead of a victim. You are fighting for your freedom, your emotional health, and your integrity. Focus on changing yourself, not on changing the manipulator. That's all we have control over is ourselves. And the two types of control a target has over the manipulation is either resistance and or extraction. So resistance means slowing things down, setting boundaries, regaining your power by redefining the relationship, keeping in mind that the manipulator may raise the ante to get you to comply. Prepare yourself for this both emotionally and physically, especially if they have been violent or threatening before. Extraction. The healthiest thing may be to disconnect from the relationship. If the terms of staying involve you to sacrifice your dignity, self-esteem, or self-worth, it is not worth staying in. And I agree completely. Oh, that's a good example. Missouri Cowboy mentioned for histrionic, Anna Nicole Smith. Yeah. Yes, I would agree. And that's a great point. XOK says, yes, Anna Nicole Smith, although I wonder if it was an act or if it was her whole personality. I would say, I would think it was her whole personality. I mean, you can tell, like with histrionic people, there tends to not be a lot of substance there. Like they're very superficial. It's all about appearances. You know, it's, I see this, I don't want to name names, but I see this there's a handful of YouTubers, like beauty and like lifestyle YouTubers out there that to me, they're just so vapid. Like there's nothing there. And not all beauty YouTubers are like this, but like I said, there's a few out there where you're just like, oh my God, how does this person get through life? Like there's no substance. It's all about a look. You know, it's the makeup, the hair, the clothes, this, that. And you just think, what if all of that were to go away in a fire? Like, who are you? If you were to get horribly burned in a fire and lose all of your stuff, like, do you even know who you are? And I think a lot of these people don't. Like they're 100% reliant on the superficiality of it all. So I think you can kind of tend to know when you're dealing with a person like that, and they just tend to get their ego needs met by conflict, like creating conflict and putting themselves in the middle of conflict. And they're just exhausting. Like, it's just constant drama. Histrionic people too tend to like continually misread situations, and they think that relationships are a lot deeper than they really are. So they just, I don't, you just kind of know, like when you're, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, you just know something's really off. This person's high drama. They're incredibly superficial. There's just not a lot of depth there. It's very attention seeking. It gets just to a point where it's exhausting. So, okay, let's see. So I liked that point. There's two things you can do. You can either resistance or extraction to manipulation and abuse. So number 11, there's 7 steps to changing the game. And so number 1, playing for time. I'm a big fan of this one. Manipulators exert pressure through both active and passive means. Some active means are becoming angry, name calling, door slamming. Some passive means are sulking, pouting, crying, subtle put downs, or snarky comments. Break the pattern by inserting time between their request and your response. So instead of jumping to meet their needs or complying to their demands, you could say things like, you know what, I need to call you back, or send their call to voicemail. I can't give you an answer right now. I need to get back to you. Leave the room, go to the bathroom, go to your car, go get some coffee. Take time to breathe and calm yourself down so you can think clearly. If you are letting them know what's going to happen, like again, that situation with the husband and wife and the manipulative mother, you are informing them. This is not open to debate. It's not open to discussion. I don't want to argue about it. I'm just telling you, like, we're going to start having dinner over here. This is what works for us. We hope you can make it. And if not, that's unfortunate. And like, even in my own life with my family and stuff, I got continually criticized. Every single life choice I ever made was criticized. There was no support. And it got to the point where I would talk to my parents and just say, hey, I'm just letting you know, like, this is what I'm doing. Or this is generally, it was like, I've already done this. Like, I've already got my real estate license, or I've already decided to go back to college, or I've already done X, Y, and Z. And this is, or I'm going to sell my house and move across the country. Like, I don't want to argue about this. I don't want to even talk about it. I'm just letting you know because I'm moving across country in a week. So make a note. My address is changing. So play for time. That's a big thing. That way you're not getting knocked off balance, and you're not feeling that you're not getting caught up in that feeling of, I need to react right away. So you set the pace of things. You control the speed. You don't need to react right away. Number 2, the broken record. This is standing your ground. Acknowledge that you hear and understand the emotion that they are expressing, and then repeat your play for time phrase. Do not start discussing, debating, or defending your point. The more you keep talking, the more they are sucking you into the mud so that they can wrestle you around. This is huge. When you realize that they're just trying to get their way, or they're just trying to agitate or provoke or start an argument or debate you about something, like, you don't need to do that. Like, once you see it, you're like, oh my God, this person just likes to argue. They like to get me upset. Then you can just disengage, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to get back to them when I get back to them, and I'm not playing this game anymore. Or maybe I'm not going to get back to them at all. Like, I'm just done. Like, I don't need people that try to upset me and provoke me and start fights and need that nonsense. So Yes. So standing your ground, doing the broken record thing. So it might be, for example, if you are deciding to, well, like the gal with the husband and wife and the mom, she's like, we're having dinner over here on Friday night. And the mom's like, oh, but it means so much to me to have dinner at my house. And you know that how much this means to me. And this is our tradition. And you don't want to break tradition, right? And, Jim has such a big family, and all I have is you and all of this stuff. And for the daughter just to say, you know what, Mom, we're having dinner over here Friday night, 6:30. We really hope you can make it. And then I would say, then nip that in the bud. Okay, I've got to go now. Like, I understand that you're upset or what have you, but I got to go now. Dinner's at 6:30. Hope to see you there. Goodbye. Click. And then you end the conversation. You set the pace. You don't need to sit there and defend and defend and defend and defend until they finally see it your way, because that's not what's going to happen. They're going to continue to argue and blame and use guilt and fear and obligation and sympathy and pity and all of these things to get you to do it their way. So once you realize this is my boundary, this is what's going to happen. I'm not calling to argue about it. I'm just calling to inform you. Dinner is at our house at 6:30. Either you're there or you're not. Period. End of story. Love you. Talk to you later. Click. So, yeah. But I think that whole continuing to argue with them, to be like, okay, we're going to continue to discuss and debate and defend until you finally agree. That's where people get hung up. And you don't need to do that. You just need to state your point and then be done. Be brief and then be gone. Okay. Desensitizing fear, anxiety, and guilt. So we must learn to tolerate some uncomfortable feelings. You cannot feel relaxed and anxious at the same time. Recall an experience where strong emotions of fear, guilt, or anxiety were provoked in you, or where you felt compelled to react. Write down what they said or did. Describe in as much detail as possible. Lie down and get comfortable. Breathe deep, focus, and then do some grounding type meditations and get centered and try to get yourself out of that feeling of anxiety and more into being centered and grounded. Okay, number 4 here, labeling the manipulation. Once you are able to label the interaction as a manipulation, you start seeing the magic trick for what it is. This is direct, clear communication with yourself. And she also recommends confronting them about the manipulation and informing them of how you feel. If their behavior continues, then you know it's intentional. So again, like with the example with the mother of saying, you know what, Mom, I feel like you're guilting me into us having dinner over there, or that you're you're trying to manipulate us into having dinner over here. We told you. The thing is though, with manipulators, they're going to twist it around. I'm not trying to guilt or manipulate you. Oh, you're so dramatic. You're just like your father. I never said that. And, if anybody's trying to be manipulative, it's you. We've always had dinner over here every single Friday night for the past 23 years. And now you want to go and change things. So who is the manipulative one? That's how that's going to go. I would put money on it. So I don't even know if I would necessarily you've really got to be pretty grounded in yourself to be able to call this nonsense for what it is and to not get knocked off balance, because that's exactly how a manipulative person is going to spin it. So you got to prepare yourself for it and realize that your feelings and your wants and your needs do matter just as much as anybody else's, that it's okay for you to say no. It's okay for you to want to do something different. And that doesn't make you selfish or mean to assert yourself like that. So, okay. Number 6. Oh, no, sorry. Number 5. I do like this one. Disabling the manipulation, letting them know that these tactics will no longer work. So again, the mother example, I understand that you want us to have dinner over at your house on Friday, but threatening me, giving me the silent treatment, threatening suicide is not going to work. And again, if they threaten suicide, you just call 911 and say, if you're really suicidal, I'm going to call 911. or you just call 911. But yeah, letting them know, hey, I see what you're doing. It's not going to work. This is what we're doing. And holding your ground. So number 6, setting your terms. Announce your intentions about your expectations. You teach the manipulator how you want to be treated. And establishing clear boundaries and limits. No more silent treatment, no more threats of leaving. You may be anxious about confronting them, but I would be more anxious about losing yourself. Expect them to up the ante. If a healthier relationship does happen with them, which it probably won't, but if it does, it will be due to your strength, not your weakness. The statement of your terms becomes the litmus test for the value of the relationship, especially in their eyes. If they only want to continue if things go their way, then you are not in an equal relationship. You're not even in a relationship. You're in a manipulationship. They will continue to push limits. So I would be really careful about this, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's ever threatened violence, who has been violent, who you feel like has the potential to be violent. You can try setting boundaries, but I would do so from a safe place because it's not going to go over well. So, I would and if you're dealing with a person that's verbally abusive and you're not concerned that it's going to escalate, they're not like threatening, they yell and they scream and they maybe belittle and they name call and stuff like that, letting them know, hey, you know what? It's okay to be angry, but it's not okay for you to be cruel. Like, don't talk. I'm done. Do not talk to me like that. That's not okay. I don't talk to you like that. Like, let's not talk to each other like that. Okay. And just really calling it out on the floor. But the thing is though, when you call a person like that out, there really has to be a point where you have to get to a place where you're comfortable implementing consequences. So a boundary is only as good as the consequence that follows. So if you're telling yourself in your mind if they're going to yell and scream and I'm going to call them out and they don't care, it's so much like dealing with a child, like there needs to be that consequence, like to threaten to take away, to be like, no, you need to not, scream and yell and kick and hit and bite. And the child keeps on. The only way they're going to learn is if there's a consequence of like, okay, then now there's no technology for the rest of the day. Or now you're not going to go to your friend's party that weekend. I told you, if you didn't knock it off, like there's going to be consequences. Same with an adult. So just yelling and screaming and begging and pleading and all of that's not giving consequences. But if you say, you know what, hey, here's the deal. I don't want to be talked to like that anymore. It's not okay with me. If this continues, I'm packing a bag and I'm going to my mother's house, or I'm whatever, or I'm leaving, or I'm, or you leave the room and you're like, you know what, I'm done. I'm done talking to you tonight. I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I will not live like this, and making it very clear. But again, like they're not going to like that. So just be prepared. Compromising and negotiating. Realize that they are not looking out for you or your best interest. Your needs are at the back of the relationship and become increasingly so the more dependent the target becomes on the manipulator. Well, my numbers are way off here. Hold on. What did I do here? Okay. I see what I did. Okay. So then back to, okay. So, sorry. She says manipulators are often like opportunistic infections. They seek out easy targets that pose the least amount of difficulty, and they pass by healthy. Healthy thinking in acting with people is accurate, appropriate, and credible. And so, yes, I think that's really about it that I got out of that book. There was a lot in there. There's a lot of, it's all about manipulation, which is very valid and very much what we talk about here. The book that we're reading for next month is emotional blackmail. And I had mentioned earlier, it's not in ebook form, and it's also not in Audible form. So it's paperback only. So this might be a book that you can get from your library, or you can order the paperback version online through Amazon. So let me run over to the chat here and see. Yes, Truth Seeker says, yes, boundary setting is scary because narcissists don't react well, but it's far less harmful than the long-term health and sanity issues. Yes. And the whole point with like the extraction part of it, I think that is a really good like line in the sand deal breaker to have, is to know where you are with that. And I made the decision a while back after nursing school. Nursing school was so awful. It was so full of hazing and bullying. And I had a lot of awful instructors. The woman that directed the department was just horrible. It was just an awful experience. And I should have left. I should have left that program, but I felt stuck because I'm like, there's a wait list. It's going to be another few years before I can get in. And it was incredibly stressful. And they know that. And, they just, I think they really got off on that, on putting students through hell. And so I vowed to myself after that experience, I'm like, I will never, ever again be treated like that again. I will never put myself in a situation like that again and stay in a situation. I don't care. I don't care what it takes. It was so awful and it was so stressful. And I will never live like that again. So that was actually something really good that came out of that experience, because there's been a few other times after that were that chaotic and that bullying and that ridiculous, where it took me like maybe about a few weeks or about a month to really get to that place of like, I need to quit this job. Like, I can't stay here. I will not stay here. I will not go through this again. But it was a good lesson for me to realize that it doesn't matter if it's not right, it's not fair. If a certain situation is just not going to change, like that nursing school was not going to change. My former frenemy at work was so horrible at the tail end. I'm like, she's not going to change. She knows exactly what she's doing. And I just got to get out of here. Like, this is not, I don't care what else I have to do, but I can't stay here. So really knowing when to leave, knowing what's workable, knowing what's not workable is a huge thing for all of us. Ileana is talking about my notes. You can find them on my website, thriveafterabuse.com, and then go to book club. It's a drop-down tab, but if you just click on it, no. It'll drop down and it'll say book club notes, and then they're all in order. True Seeker says, I'm sorry that happened to you, Dana. But you know what, though? Here's the thing. Thank you. But I am a big fan of, I feel like we can always grow from every single thing that happens to us. And the upside to that situation was I was so proud of myself when I left that situation, even though I was terrified. I'm like, I didn't have the money. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I'm like, I was having anxiety attacks. I was losing sleep. It was not good. Walking on eggshells all day during work. It was so stressful. But I was so proud of myself for leaving and just being like, I will figure it out and I will be okay. And and then I think it's just what you kind of make from it. But I'm always been the kind of person, like, I try to squeeze out all of the good I possibly can in any given situation. And doing so really helps to release anger towards that situation. If you can make the situation, the aftermath of it, work for you somehow, some way, shape, or form, it really does help to release that anger. Because that anger comes from oftentimes being victimized, even if we truly are a victim. But if we can then use that towards our highest and greatest good, or towards the highest and greatest good of somebody else, get positive meaning from it, it just helps to take off the pressure of that anger from it. So yeah, LP says, Dana, I'm at that point too. I'm ready to resign. These people will not change. Yeah. Oh, really? Eliana says, I'm getting a 404 when I go to your website. To Dana's notes there below page. That's weird. I wonder if I need to empty my cache if my website's down for some reason. It's coming up for me, but I might need to clear my cache. I don't know. Maybe try back in a little bit. I don't know why you're getting a 404. You shouldn't be. thriveafterabuse.com. Is that what you're going to? Okay. Let's see. Scrolling through. Well, I think, okay, Missouri Cowboy has the notes open. Yeah, Stephanie's talking about a work situation. She says, she just won't change. There's no point in talking to her. Talking to my manager will just add it to the fire. That's where I was at work. I tried talking to my boss about things. And, of course, my boss was like, well, we can all talk about it together. And I was like, no, she's a hateful, evil witch. Like, it was this one moment I'll never forget. Like, we went out for lunch. I told her I was writing a book, and she looked at me with contempt and disgust. And it was so bad. I got in the car and I texted another friend. I'm like, oh my God, I've never had anybody look at me like this. That was on like a Saturday. On Monday, everything had changed. Totally icy reception. She was fine. She was digging up every single thing I'd ever done wrong. I was walking on eggshells big time. It was just absolutely awful. I was coming home crying. I mean, it was just unbearable. And finally I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I sound crazy. Like, talking to my boss after about a week of that, and other people saw it in the office, but my boss was like, really, I want to work towards a solution. And it was like, no, she doesn't. Like, she's intentionally trying to make my life hell. Whether she realizes it or not, I don't know. I don't know if it just kind of triggered that narcissistic injury with her, or like what all happened. But because I'd seen this happen with my frenemy at work before with her family, like her son and other people in her life. And I really don't know if she was aware of like that she would do a 180. But again, like, it doesn't matter. It was not tolerable. And I'm so thankful that I was able to it was such a great feeling to just go in there and be like, and I've turned in my 2 weeks notice. And then at that point too, everything changed and she became a lot nicer. And then I think it was that realization of, she realized she doesn't have any other friend except for me. And now I was leaving and she couldn't play stupid of like, oh, I didn't realize I was making your life difficult. I was just pointing out everything that you were doing wrong and making up a few new things, but oh, I didn't know, just then she realized, oh my God, and had tried the nerve, had tried reaching out to me a few times. And I did, of course, I just blocked and deleted it. Cause I was like, you've got to be kidding me, lady. Like, no way. We are so incredibly done. It's not even funny. Yeah. Stephanie was saying, yeah, I'm done, but I'm stuck in an office with her all day. I would say it's time to start updating your resume and being like, you know what, the beauty when one door closes, another one opens. And sometimes, I think oftentimes we have to get pushed out of a situation in order to actually fly and grow. And I have found like more often than not, when stuff becomes that absurd in an environment, it's life trying to kind of shove me out of the nest and being like, it's time. It's been time and you've been fighting it for like a long time now. So now you have no choice but to go. And things always tend to work out. So okay. So with that said, so Stephanie, real quick too, I would say find some peace in your life. I will tell you the one thing I know for certain, like the only thing I know for certain in this life is that I guarantee you will never look back on this situation, this coworker, this job, any of this in your life. You will never look back on this and think to yourself, you know what, boy, I really wish I would have worried about that more. You will never do that. So knowing that, if anything, your future self is going to look back and be like, man, I really wish I had more fun during that time, that I wish I would have found more peace in my life, that I wish I would have done more like relaxing things, that I would not have let this upset me as much as it did. It was so not worth it. So keep reminding yourself of this. Like this is not going to matter like a month after you quit, probably even an hour after you quit. You will never think to yourself, boy, I really wish I would have worried about that more. And that goes for any situation. Anything. I've been through so much in my life, and I've never once thought, I really wish I would have worried about that more. You either control what you can control, or you let it go because you can't control it. But worrying it provides that false sense of like, I don't know, control, I guess, or like productivity, but it's not. Like you can only do what you can do, and then you just let the rest go. So, okay. With that said, you guys have a fantastic rest of your night. I will see you Tuesday, because Angie and I are going to be doing a live stream again. We're going to be on her channel. So Angie Atkinson, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I hope to see you there. We're going to go for about an hour. If I don't see you then, I'll see you Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you guys take care. Have a fantastic rest of your week. And just lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. Oh, thank you, Missouri Cowboy, for the live stream donation. And says, excellent notes. So many excellent tools for reference and use. Thank you, Dana. You are so very welcome. And take care, y'all. Have a good one.